Okay, can everybody see my screen? Awesome. All right. Hello, everyone. So today we're going to be talking a little bit. I'm going to be spending some time talking about the power of storyboarding, and this is my favorite part in design. I've been designing for over 10 years right now, and whenever I get to work on new features, new products, the reason why I love design is because of storyboarding. And let me admit that it's because I can put myself into a user's perspective, tell a story, tell a really good story, and make sure that we build the right solution for the right problem. So, just a little bit of introduction about myself. I'm a senior product designer in the ITSM team in ServiceNow. Um, I've been at ServiceNow for close to a year and a half right now. Overall, I have 8 to 10 years of experience in designing for a wide range of products. I was working at PlayStation. I was working at an oncology electronic health record, which was very fun. I know a lot of people ask me this question: does design play a vital role in medical field? It actually really does. I was working in a small e-commerce company. Right now, I'm at ServiceNow, which is an enterprise product. I've worked in so many different domains, and I've loved designing for every single product. Some of the fun facts: I love playing sports. So if you are from ServiceNow, you would know that whenever somebody sees me outside, they're always going to see me playing either volleyball, basketball, or some kind of sport. So I love playing sports. I'm nocturnal. My usual work hour starts around 12 o'clock, and I usually sleep at 4 a.m. And that's most of the people who know me. I work with the IDC team, India team, and I'm always available in India time, and I'm not available in US timing. So I get up at 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock, but I'm always working at night. Last but not the least, I am Batman. So just let me just make it clear for everyone. Okay, so going with today's agenda, first, let's we're going to quickly go over the overview of storyboarding. What is a storyboarding? Why do people usually do storyboarding, and why is it useful? Second, I'll go over how a storyboard is created. I'll go through some of the an example of how you create a storyboard from the scratch. How do you use a template? How do you take a storyboard from one level to the next level? Uh, and then I'm going to go over some of the misconceptions. So we hear a lot of misconceptions about storyboard. Is it same as a journey map? Is it same as there are a lot of different names, but how is storyboarding different from some of these things? And finally, I'm going to conclude with some of the key takeaways of storyboarding. And please feel free to ask me questions after the presentation. First off, what is a storyboard? A storyboard is extremely simple. Storyboard is a sequence of images, pictures, illustrations that you use to develop a story. So I used to read these Calvin and Hobbes thing in newspaper all the time, and I loved reading those things. And that's what I do in storyboarding. Whenever I get a problem from a product owner or from our investors, what I do is I think of that visually, like what's the problem? So is what is the user trying to solve here? And I try to visualize that, draw pictures, actual images of people doing those activities, like usually using a phone, trying to order something from McDonald's, do anything. So visualize whatever the problem is given. So you draw, you use features like templates, whatever it is, use stories to communicate your design. That's it. That is storyboarding. And why is storyboarding so important? Like I mentioned, storyboard helps you put yourself into the end user's shoe, or you put yourself into the end user's perspective, and then you communicate your ideas using images. So it helps you think. You can think through the problem. Second, it communicates idea. You can use storyboard to share your designs or your concepts with key stakeholders. You can communicate with designers, you can communicate with product owners, you can use it to actually share it with high-level stakeholders as well, saying that, okay, this is what we are trying to develop. Finally, it helps you memorize things. So I don't know if you guys know this, but image is 60,000 times more powerful than a word. So it's actually research shows if you have an image versus text, image is 60,000 times more powerful than just reading text. And so it helps you memorize things. When you see it, when you see a picture, you can actually relate to those pictures. Who should be involved in storyboarding? A lot of people actually. So, but there is no one right person. a stakeholder. You don't have to be a designer to create storyboards. You can be a researcher. You can be a product owner. You can be anyone uh, who is invested in this product. So ideally, what I do typically in my work is I like having a group of people. I usually have a product owner, we have researchers, we have designers, everyone brainstorming and creating the storyboard together. Now, because of COVID, we used Miro to create storyboards, but it has been very effective these days. So I get this question all the time. So when do you actually storyboard? Is there a right time to storyboard? Actually, there is. So you should always try to storyboard after you kind of know what the problem is. You should start, you get a requirement, you have identified a problem. That is when you start storyboarding at the beginning of the design exploration. Um, and you should, when you're trying to storyboard, you should make sure that you don't have high fidelity designs. You should make sure that you storyboard before you actually come up with these high fidelity designs or prototypes. As you can see in the process of design, storyboard is where it comes after defining the problem. It's in the explore state before you validate your design. This is where storyboard fits in. And what do you need to storyboard? You actually don't need anything. You need a good idea. You need to know, you don't have to be good at drawing. You don't have to be anything. You just need an idea. You should know the problem, and you can start using pen and pencil, or you can use a sheet of paper and start storyboarding. Some people use storyboard templates. I am going to be updating some of these templates here. I'm going to be uploading some of the templates you can use in this presentation. A lot of people like using templates. Some of the people just use paper and pencil. That's totally fine. And some of the environments which people usually storyboard, you can storyboard yourself. You can create group workshops. You can storyboard with teams or online, like I mentioned, from the time COVID hit. We have been using Miro to start storyboarding. So what's the process of creating a storyboard? How do I create a storyboard? First, it's actually very valuable to do some market research, to do some user research, to identify what problem you're trying to solve. Gather as much data as possible before you kind of start storyboarding. Then you have a plot. So basically you have a hero, you have the main character, you have the scene. Where is the storyboard happening? What is the location? What is the surroundings for the users? Just to create a scene. Third, take a pencil. You're all ready. You can start drawing. You can start creating storyboards. This is a simple sample template I've created for storyboards. Please feel free to download these templates. But you have a bunch of boxes. You have places where you can write texts. You have a persona. Persona is basically the main actor. They can be sub-actors and the scenario where the storyboard takes place. Here is an example of a storyboard. In this storyboard, one of the office, a person would like to restock his supplies. So he looks at the supplies. He sees that he has some missing. He goes into his desk. He looks at some of the inventory. He orders some stuff. He gets a success message. So it's as simple as just drawing something and just putting your ideas in a sheet of paper. So I'm going to talk about some of the misconceptions about storyboarding, and I'm going to give you an example of storyboard and talk about some of these misconceptions, how these misconceptions are usually wrong. First thing people ask me is, do I need to be good at drawing? If I want a storyboard, do I need to be good at drawing? And it's not true. You don't have to be good at drawing. Let me give you an example. Here in this scenario, you're actually storyboarding a scenario where Tim Griffin, who is the main persona, he wants to buy a gift for his wife's birthday, but he can't find good options online, or he can't find good options anywhere. So he's talking to his friend Tina. And as you can see, some of these illustrations are very highly drawn illustrations. As you can see, based on his reaction, he's concerned that he's not able to find a good gift for his wife. And he's talking to his friend. And his friend, Tina, is suggesting him to use gifts.com. And in the next scenario, Tim thinks to himself that, yeah, I've done this research a lot, but I don't think gifts.com is actually useful. But when he goes home, he looks at some of these options from gifts.com. He's amazed to see some really good options, and he goes and orders a watch. So this is a scenario where a user tries to order a gift for his wife. And this is an example of someone who has done a really good job of drawing. I'm going to go over another example of somebody who doesn't know how to draw. And this is drawn with just simple circles and very basic drawing. So here, same user, same persona, same scenario. Even with not such a good illustration, you can communicate this idea with a very strong, outcome. So as you can see, this drawing is not high fidelity, but it communicates exactly what you want to communicate in the storyboard. Some of the other misconceptions uh, is storyboarding only for the designers? No, it's not just for the designers. Anybody can storyboard. If you are trying to solve a problem, if you know how you're going to approach for that problem, you can start storyboarding. There is no rule that only designers storyboard. One of the other biggest misconception is I need to have wireframes. I need to have mock-ups in my storyboards. Storyboard is a concept. You're just communicating a story. You're not designing within a storyboard. You're going to go into the design phase later, but storyboard is used to understand what problem you're trying to solve. Last but not the least, is journey map the same as storyboard? No, journey map is much different. I know you would have attended a journey map session yesterday, but journey map is the whole end-to-end journey of a product. Storyboard is for a specific scenario, try to address a specific scenario. So all in all, in conclusion, visuals are extremely powerful and it's a great way to bring story to life. So try to use visuals whenever you can. Every bit you can use visuals, it's going to be extremely useful for your stakeholders. And finally, remember, every great product starts with a compelling story. Thank you so much, and I'm up for questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ashok, for dialing in on the road and giving us that awesome presentation. We've got one question for you, and this comes from Dana. It's about the phases, and the question is, does the problem discovery include marketing research? And do you consider competitors and market trends as a part of this process?
Yeah, so that's actually a very good question. So you do need to understand what the problem is. So you need to do some research to understand what's the scenario you're trying to solve. You don't need to validate your design. So storyboarding is in the early phase of the design. You're trying to understand the problem, you're sketching out concepts. So good research is going to be useful, but it's not a compulsory thing. You don't need to have research. You can start storyboarding with just a concept.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. That was the only question that we got so far. I'm sure some more will trickle in for later on because that's what always happens. But let's kick it over to our next session. Thanks, Ashok.
Thanks, everyone.
Good. Thank you. Safe travels. Next up, I'm excited to introduce Anna Lay. She's a UX UI designer at ServiceNow working on their visual experience and design systems team. Anna recently graduated from UC San Diego, where she earned her BS in cognitive science and a design minor. And prior to working and joining ServiceNow, she was designing in the Bay Area, working on financial revenue products at Workday. Outside of work, Anna enjoys traveling the world and is very much looking forward to doing it more in the safer future. So I'm passing it on to Anna to join the stage and talk about how might we questions.
Thanks, James. Okay, let me share my screen. And let's go into present mode. Can everyone see my screen? Good. Okay. Yeah, so hi everyone, my name is Anna. Today I'll be presenting on how to create how might we questions. So just a brief overview of our agenda. I'm just going to go into a quick introduction about myself, then give a high-level overview of what are how might we questions. Then we'll dive into how might we question actually fits into the overall design process and methodology. And then we'll dive into how to create your own how might we questions and a quick demo of a how might we question. And then we'll wrap it up with some key takeaways. Yeah, so just a little more about myself. My name's Anna. I am a UX UI designer at ServiceNow. I am a recent-ish new grad, but I have been working in different software enterprise companies, but I've been at ServiceNow for about 1.5 years. And currently I'm working on building components in the design system team. And fun facts about me, I love dogs, I love traveling, and I love throwback R&B music. just diving into it, what is a how might we question? So how might we question is a very open-ended question that has framed an identified design problem or design space and user needs. These questions are very important because they are used to really invoke participants of a workshop to brainstorm, to ideate, and to create solutions. And these solutions are, I mean, hopefully like a meaningful solution, something that relates back to user needs that are identified, like the design problem space that was identified in the beginning. So it's kind of like a vehicle driving you from your problem statement to your eventual solution. Why are how might we questions valuable? So I think how might we questions come off as something that may be a little trivial if you just look at it from a very high level, because it is just simply a question. But what it really does is bring a lot of value to the overall process, the design process and design thinking that ends up with a very valuable solution. So the first thing is that a how might we question does is that it really encourages brainstorm amongst participants. So the question itself is typically a very broad question that helps to promote the creation of different solutions to help answer what the question is. It helps to guide participants to collaborate as well. So there's really no wrong or right answers to what the how might we question is. The next thing is that it helps to align focus for different stakeholders. So you always should refer back to your how might we question to recall the initial problem statements, the initial user needs that were identified in the very early phases of your design process. You can continually come back to the how might we question through your iteration stages, even when you're solutioning and you are prototyping and testing your ideas, to see if the solution that you created is actually answering the question that you initially came up with in the beginning. Is it solving the right problem? And lastly, you're able to make a meaningful solution using a how might we question. When you ideate off of a how might we question instead of just an arbitrary problem or user need that you may have not structured and framed in the right way, this ensures that the ideas that you're creating from the how might we question does stem from a true user need and isn't just an arbitrary solution to a problem that might not actually exist. So who should be involved when creating your how might we question? Typically, stakeholders who have a really good idea and understanding about the problem space and user needs are the main people who need to be involved with this question creation. You also can include your designers. Well, typically the designers are also the people who have the problem space and user needs in their knowledge base. But you can also include product managers and engineers. When you're creating this question, it could be a very open-ended experience. Like there should be a lot of different perspectives involved in it because it really helps to align all the people who are involved in the project to come together in agreement on something that is driving the end solution. When is the right time to start creating your how might we question? So you want to do this after you already have the problem and challenge identified and the core needs of the users is clear to everyone who is participating in creating the question. This is typically done after any research, any discovery, any competitive analysis. Like you already know what is on the table, you know what the issues are, and you're ready to kind of jump into your brainstorming solutioning phase. So the how might we question fits right in the middle of those two stages. You want to do this before you actually start the ideation and brainstorming because the how might we question helps as a vehicle into the thinking of these potential solutions. As I showed before, this is kind of the standard process that we follow at ServiceNow. You can definitely find different design methodologies out there, and they all kind of contain similar aspects of methods. So here's kind of where the how might we question fits in. As you can see, it's squeezed right between the define and explore phases, but you always want to make sure that it's right after the define because you want to have to know the problem statement and the opportunities and user needs that you're focusing on. So now diving into it, how do you create your own how might we question? The materials you need are just a piece of paper or a template. There will be templates provided that I've created that you can use, but really you just need a piece of paper. You need writing utensil. You want to have the problem statements or user needs that you found in the previous phases identified and printed somewhere, or I guess just somewhere like at hand, so that you can always refer back to them when you're writing this question. And if you're going to be doing this in a large group, you would want stickers and markers for voting so that you can align on one. The type of environments that you can do this, or that you can create your how might we question in, is typically a workshop, in small groups, and now I guess onboarding or online tools like Miro, since we can't really get together in smaller groups now. And then you can even do this by yourself if you need to. It's not as recommended, but I know that some teams are a lot smaller. So if you're a sole designer, then this is still something that is valuable to do by yourself. So how do you create your own how might we question? The first thing you want to do is start with your problem statement. And you want to take your problem statement and frame it to fit into how might we question. And this is simply placing the words how might we, and then inserting whatever the problem is, and then adding like a question mark. So it's just framing it so that it is a question instead of just a statement. After that, you want to create 3 to 4 variants of your how might we question that are more focused versions of the original one. You want to make sure that you're making a lot of different variations so that when you end up with the final one, that is a balance between the focus, and it's a balance between focus and generic. Like it's not going to be one or the other, but it's somewhere in the sweet spot that is the most thought-provoking. So in the end, you're going to want to make sure that your statement that is decided is broad enough to propagate ideas, but narrow enough to guide focus back to what was originally identified as a need. The most effective how might we questions have the best of both of those worlds. So here's a quick example. So a problem statement could be that students are struggling to remember to complete their homework on time. As you can see, this is a very simple, straightforward problem statement. It gets to the point of what the students are feeling and what the issue and need is. Some draft how might we questions could be, the first one is simply the first step of adding how might we and adding a question mark. So how might we help students to remember to complete their homework on time? The second version is just another iteration. So how might we help students to keep themselves organized about their homework? So this adds a little more complexity in the original problem statement by adding in details about organization, about organization. The third draft how might we question is how might we remind students that their homework is due? So this also is taking on a different perspective of the original problem statement and the original how might we question by adding in key wording such as like reminding them that their homework is due. And yeah, so this just really helps to kind of morph the original how might we question into different phrases and different words to see what would really help to trigger like this ideation, like what really is generic enough but focused enough to help sprout ideas. And of course you can make many more if it comes to mind, but typically like 3 to 4 is good enough to choose from. And then landing on the final how might we question is how might we make it easier for students to track and organize their homework so that they remember to get it done. So here you can see that from the problem statement to the final how might we question, there is a lot of different elements and wording involved in that to help your participants or people who are going to be using this as an ideation tool to focus on. So if we focus on the statement here, you have to track and organize. How do we make it easier? And how do we make it so that they remember to get it done? So wrapping up with that, we're just going to summarize the key takeaways that we just discussed. The first one is that how might we questions helps to easily launch participants into brainstorm mode. The question itself helps to generate a lot of great ideas, and there's no right or wrong answers to the question. The second note is that the how might we question helps to realign all the stakeholders to keep their eye on the prize. You're going to be able to find a solution to the user needs that were identified. And I know a lot of the times it's really easy to, this goes into the third one, acts as a railroad track through the rest of the process. So it's really easy to derail and think of a bunch of really cool ideas and things that you wish you could do, but you really want to remember that the reason why you're designing something is because there's a need somewhere and you've identified that and you have validated that that's a need. So having the how might we question always be a reference throughout the rest of the design process really makes you, the user or the designer, aware of what the needs are instead of being accidentally distracted by a really cool concept or a really cool feature that might not actually address a true user need. And yeah, that is the end of my presentation. So thank you for listening. And feel free to email me if you have any other questions or add me on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Thanks, Anna. That was great. We do have one question, and I'm so glad that Alicia asked it because she phrased it so much better than I could have, and I've been thinking about it the whole time we were talking. She said, I've facilitated a few how might we sessions, and usually this is a really challenging step to achieve the balance between an open-ended question that is still focused on the problem. When you're facilitating the how might we question activity, do you have any best practices or techniques you use to help workshop participants strike the right balance between being broad and focused? Do you have any rubrics or tools that you can help participants and stakeholders determine their how might we questions are framed? That's kind of long, but.
Yeah, this is a really good question. I personally do not have any tools for this, but I have also done a couple workshops and I do know that it is definitely really challenging. What has helped me a lot is that I ensure that like each participant is doing their own sets of how might we questions so that there are a lot of different ideas that are being generated, because I know that the question itself, it seems like there's not much more that you can like spread out to in terms of the question. So having a lot of participants really bring their own questions and then being able to vote on them helps to align people on what they think is like an open-ended question and a focused question. Like it brings a lot of different perspectives. And I know that having the words open-ended and focused can also be very subjective. So I think it's really about making sure that all the stakeholders are in agreement and all the people who are working on the project are in alignment on what is open-ended and what is focused.
I love that answer. It's so easy to lose a workshop right at the beginning if you don't have everybody agreed on what you're trying to accomplish, right, or what you're trying to answer.
Yeah, and the voting part really helps too. Just making sure that everyone who's involved gets a say and is heard for what they think is open-ended enough. And just, I guess, making sure that when you look at the question, you're not like you don't have tunnel vision on one solution. Making sure that the question isn't a leading question into like a solution.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. We've got one more for you, and then we'll move on to the next one and catch a few more questions at the end. This one is from Topher. He says, "Do you consider going beyond stakeholders in order to make the activity more inclusive to gather ideas from other perspectives? Stakeholders are typically considered to be higher level."
I would personally, if possible, include maybe one person who has like a very high opinion on what they think the how might we question should be. If possible, include someone who has a very high opinion on what they expect the users to be doing, because it is kind of like a phase where it feels like you're able to participate in creating the how might we question. So I think including the stakeholder, if they are aware of what the user needs are and what the problem is still beneficial in that sense. But of course, if they're like unable to be reached, I don't think it's like a necessity. I think it's okay to do this, especially with designers and maybe the project managers or PMs who know a lot about who the users are and what the problem is.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Anna. That's it for now. I think we're ready to move on.
And now introducing Valencio Cardozo. He's a senior product designer at ServiceNow, where he's helping to shape the foundation for unified employee experiences. His 15-year-long career in design and tech began with a focus on branding and advertising. He then went on to found 2 startups in Dubai, after which he focused on driving tech company growth in New York, Denver, and San Diego. Apart from tech, Val enjoys spending his free time surfing and hanging out with his family. Without further ado, let's welcome Valencio to talk about Crazy Eights.
Thank you, James, for that incredible intro. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. All right, can everyone see that? Awesome. Hey all, as James mentioned, my name is Valencio Cardozo. I'm a product designer at ServiceNow. And as part of our UX Theater series, I'm here to deliver a talk on how you can leverage an ideation technique called Crazy Eights to help you and your teams brainstorm solutions fast. More importantly, I'm hoping you walk away from this talk feeling empowered, motivated, and ready to conduct your own Crazy Eight sessions to solve problems, not just at work, but for anything. In this presentation, I'll start with a brief overview of what Crazy Eights is and why you should leverage it for rapid ideation. After which I'll go over how you can prepare for a successful session. Next, we'll walk through each step of the Crazy Eights method, and then touch on what you can do after your session and conclude with some key takeaways, which will include a facilitator's guide to help you conduct your own sessions. So what is Crazy Eights and why should you use it? To start with, let's face it, you're constantly dealing with issues that require you to think outside the box and be creative on how you tackle them. Whether it's at work where you have to come up with new product ideas or additional options, or in life where you got to take care of your kids while you're working from home, or wanting to lead a healthier lifestyle. All of these issues require us to come up with solutions. However, you ever notice how your first ideas are typically your worst ideas? So Crazy Eights really helps you with that, and I'll walk you through just how. So in a nutshell, Crazy Eights is a brainstorming exercise that challenges people to sketch 8 distinct ideas in 8 minutes. The reason here is that your first idea generally tends to be your least innovative, and so the goal is to push beyond that. By doing so, you're leveraging your subconscious mind, in turn generating a wider variety of solutions that can be applied to any challenge or problem space. So when should you use it? Crazy Eights is great early on in the ideation process, but it can be leveraged at any time you or your team is stuck on a potential problem and need to generate a lot of ideas fast. In design thinking, it's called diverging because we're expanding the pool of options before we need to converge onto an ideal solution. In ServiceNow's creative process, we typically leverage the exercise after the problem and the opportunity have been defined, and is conducted during the ideate and explore phase, since that's the point at which we're trying to come up with as many ideas as possible, hence the name. So preparing for the session, the first step is really to gather the right stakeholders. This can be anyone invested in your project, from owners to managers to designers, engineers, even researchers. I've found success in bringing end users into the mix as they are generally closest to the problem. While you can conduct a session alone, I do find a sweet spot to be around 3 to 4 people. Any more and it starts becoming a little unmanageable. The second step, I'd say, is to review any previous activities with your team, as it'll be a good way to refresh everyone on what's been done so far. and how create like a foundation for them to work with. Depending on the type of project and phase you're in, it could include anything from research to project briefs, anything you feel like the team could benefit from being exposed to. And then the third and like a very important step in the process is to understand the problem. And there's no one better actually than having the key stakeholders deliver that message. This will help give the team some much needed context into the challenge and help them align on any specific outcomes that the team needs to focus on. The next set of steps is really around setting up the logistics of the session itself. First, have a team warm themselves up by giving them some time to do their own research. You can even walk them through some existing industry solutions in the space or common patterns that could also be applied. Next, have a few prompters with the pressure to generate so many ideas in such a short period of time. People naturally get stuck. A prompter, like having them focus on a very visual idea from one solution and limited visuals for another one, can help with unblocking them. Lastly, you'll need a set of materials to run your session. Luckily for Crazy Eights, all you really need is a sheet of paper, A4, 8.5 by 11, a pen for each of the participants, and a way to track your time. This, of course, is for an in-person session. If you're conducting a remote Crazy Eight session, you can combine like a video conferencing app with a collaborative sharing tool. I personally use like Zoom or Google Hangouts for video conferencing and Miro or Google Slides for managing the actual session. So well, here we are, the actual session itself. Let's take a walkthrough of what that looks like. Start off with handing out blank sheets of paper to all of the participants and have them fold the sheet in half 3 times. Once they unfold the sheet, they'll have 8 symmetrical panels, which will be the frames for each of their ideas. In Crazy Eights, time is everything. Set up a timer allotting 60 seconds for each panel, 8 minutes in total. You can use any clock or app that works for you. I personally like to use the Design Sprint Crazy Eights timer, which has both a mobile app and a browser version, and I've linked to it on the bottom of this slide. So now into the fun part, the actual sketching itself. Participants start on the first block and move on to the next one every 60 seconds until all 8 blocks have been completed. Sketches should be really rough. You can even just write down thoughts. They don't need to be visual. The most important part is getting everyone's ideas onto paper. Throughout the exercise, continue to remind people of the time and make sure that it's clear which panel they should be on. Remember to use prompters if you see people get stuck, solutions where there's minimal information versus an information dense option, or a version that's super visual versus one that has limited visuals. Really just have fun with it. Once the 8 minutes are up and pens are down, it's time for the team to debrief and share back their solutions. Have everyone explain their ideas to the entire group in time-boxed 1-minute pitches, because it's equally important to keep the group's momentum going. Once everyone's had their turn, it's time to evaluate and gain alignment. A good way to do this is through a dot voting exercise. First, have everyone place their sketches on a common wall or gallery. Next, give participants a set number of votes, which they can place on ideas or features that they like. Sometimes it's beneficial to also give the team a set of negative votes for things that they didn't like. I personally like to use green dots for positive, red dots for negative, but any 2 colors will work. If you don't have any colored dot stickers, the team can use different colored pens to mark their votes. And once voting is complete, just have the entire group discuss ideas or features that really stood out to them. This is a good way to start gaining some alignment. So once the session is over, what next? Now that the team's generated a bunch of great ideas and aligned to the ones that they like, it's time to figure out the next steps and take the strongest ideas and explore them further. One step you could take is to storyboard out your workflows. The people who will be utilizing the team solution typically have common journeys that they take. As you heard Ashok's talk on the power of storyboarding touch on this. Another natural step is to take the one or two best ideas and begin adding more realistic details like images or more realistic copy, so fleshing them out a bit more. You could then turn these solutions into prototypes that could be used to conduct feedback sessions with people who would be using your product. And lastly, another good option if you're looking for more input is to run a second Crazy 8 session. But this time with a different set of participants, maybe even with your end users. This is a great way to collect different perspectives and could reinforce certain assumptions or bring new ideas to the table. It all depends on what you're looking to achieve out of your next set of activities. So takeaways. What do we learn? First, you learn that Crazy 8 is a great way to help you brainstorm ideas to any problem. Your initial idea is typically your least innovative, and so by pushing beyond that, you're leveraging your subconscious mind, in turn generating a wider variety of solutions that can be applied to any challenge or problem space. Secondly, it's fast, it's easy, it's lightweight. The actual activity itself is only 8 minutes and requires minimal materials, and it's simple to follow. So keep writing, keep drawing, keep moving, but most importantly, Crazy 8 is supposed to be fun, so just have fun with it. And then thirdly, exploration is the engine that drives innovation. So Crazy 8 is a great activity to get your team to bring their creativity to the table while moving forward and aligning on ideas and solutions together. And finally, as you leave here today, I want you to pick a current issue that you're facing, be it in work or in life. And, honestly, just try out the Crazy 8 methodology for yourself to see if it really does help you with brainstorming better solutions. And with that, I appreciate you following along with me and hope you find the information that I shared with you valuable. And now I'll just open it up to the forum.
Awesome, thanks, Francio. We've got a couple of questions just for you, and then we'll open it up for the other presenters as well. First one is, how, if at all, has the transition to remote collaboration impacted the Crazy 8 workshops?
That's a good question. So I actually, so at ServiceNow, like most of the teams that I work with are distributed. So the current team that I'm on, the current team that I'm on, I'm based in San Diego. My PM was based in Atlanta, and the engineers that I was working with was based out of India. And so most of my sessions are run remotely, and so like it hasn't been an issue. The way that I did run, or I tend to run those sessions would be Zoom, Google Hangouts. Now we're using Miro at ServiceNow, so that's sort of the tool of choice. And then I just have everyone sketch onto just a regular, just do the sketches, take a picture of it, upload it, and then we vote on it. So it really hasn't impacted, but because I've been working with distributed teams anyways.
Yeah, it's interesting. I noticed that for the first few months of working completely remote, it was really challenging. And then all of a sudden I realized that there were just better ways to do everything. And so all my relationships with my remote teammates became better. It seems like barriers, but maybe it's really not. We've got another one. How do you include stakeholders that are self-conscious about their sketching skills?
Oh, that's a great question. Like, to be honest, it's a lot more lightweight than like bringing everyone into storyboarding. But what I might do before, like if I know that the team is like like I've done it with designers, and so with designers, you just bring them in and everybody knows what's up, right? Like, so they'll all get into it, and it's easy. But when I start bringing in engineers, like you'll get that question a lot. And so what I tell them is, I might run them through like a quick 5 or 10 minutes where I show them how easy it is to sketch. Like, so I'll draw like stick figures, or I'll draw some stars and things of that nature, and just to show them how easy, like, you know, like boxes. Or I might, if we're doing it in Miro and we're doing it all online, I'll set up some like sticks, like I'll set up like templates that they can leverage, like boxes or arrows and things of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
Or if they're really struggling, I'll be like, hey, you know what, you can just write out your idea. You don't need to necessarily sketch it out. So the main thing is just to have them transfer their idea to the rest of the team, to communicate that out. And if it's a good idea, one of us can flesh it out.
Yeah. Awesome. This one's from Alicia. She says, you mentioned that sometimes it helps to have prompts to help people generate ideas quickly. Can you elaborate on what kinds of prompts you use, or share some examples? I've heard of some like mashups, like what would Ubering for tutoring look like, etc. And I was wondering if you have any you've tried during Crazy Weeks.
Since most of mine, it depends. It's contextual, right? Depending on, so like if I'm doing an interface, right, and I might do something like, okay, for the first idea, let's go super dense with information, right? For the next idea, no copy. So like you start going through these, you start giving people constraints. Can't think of any other good prompters, but if you Google it, there's a bunch out there.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I had a colleague who used to always say constraints are good for designers, and I can hear her saying that every time I hear someone mention. Ashok, if you're still here with us, we've got a question for you. If not, the other panelists, feel free to jump in. Question for you, Ashok, is, are there any scenarios in which storyboards are not a good tool?
Can you repeat the question? Are there any scenarios where a storyboard is not a good tool?
Correct.
I can't think of a scenario where a storyboard is not a good tool. I mean, when you, is that question related to when is storyboard not the right time to do it, or for what scenario is storyboard not a good tool? I didn't understand the question.
Yeah, I think just in general, elaborating on when we might be applying them incorrectly. Have you ever seen storyboards applied when it just wasn't really the right time to use them or the right problem?
Yeah, that makes total sense. So, a lot of people like try to address the problem, create designs, solve the problem. They have an idea in mind, and that's when they try to kind of fill it up using storyboards. Once you have thought of a solution, you have experience, you know what the problem is, you know what the solution is, you've covered the solution. That is when they try to fill it up with storyboards, trying to communicate designs with stakeholders, which is totally fine. But the actual power of storyboard comes in when you actually are trying to understand of the experience, the overall user experience, the happy parts, etc. I find from my experience, storyboarding is most valuable before you actually go into the wireframing or the prototyping phase. I guess that answers the question.
Yeah, I think so. If not, feel free to pop into the chat and let us know if you have some clarifying questions. We've got one more for Anna. How do you know, you talked a lot about how to make sure that your questions are the right balance between broad and narrow. Can you talk about any indications that you haven't done a good job, so maybe you need to revisit and reform them?
Yeah, let's see. So I think a good indication is if you can already see a single solution in the question that you've come up with, like it's very obvious what that feature is or what that UI can look like when you have your how might we question out there. So you want to make sure that the question you have doesn't allude or hint to anything that is a solid feature. So the question you have can have a solution that addresses it in many different ways. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah,
I know it's very tricky. It's a very delicate balance, and I think it's just to make sure that you are, if you're thoughtful about it and you're constantly asking yourself, is this too broad? Is this too narrow? Then you eventually land with something that will get you to a number of solutions.
so is it, I guess I'm extrapolating a little bit here, but do you sometimes, can you tell from the answers that you get to the question if they're too similar to each other, that maybe the question wasn't?
I think the question itself. So I guess going back to our student doing their homework, like maybe something would be like, how could we get students to so the question was, how can we get students to remember to do their homework? Maybe something more like a specific how might you question that would not be as, you know, broad is, how can we get students to look at their phones and see a reminder that their homework is due, or something like that. Like, you know, that the solution is embedded into the question. Like that is something that we are trying to avoid with the how might we question. So we don't want these solutions embedded in the question. Like, I know we can look at it for a really long time and get really specific on what the how might we question should be, but I think it's just to remember to broaden that scope too and generalize it when you do see that it's too narrowed.
Thank you. We've got a question just for everyone. There's obviously this clear flow from storyboarding to how might we questions, and then to ways to kind of almost answer those questions and ideate. And they seem to feed into each other very well, all these approaches. So I'm curious, is it important to have the same group of stakeholders involved in every phase of this process, or can we swap people in and out? That's for anybody, so feel free to jump in.
I could take a crack at that. So from my perspective, it depends. Like the quintessential answer is like, it depends, right? So typically there's a set of people who are close to the project, and then there's a set of people who are close to the problem. And then those tend to be users, right? Versus the people who are on the project itself. And so it really depends. And do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I definitely also agree that it depends. Like every step of the design process is involving different people. The most consistent person that is throughout the whole entire process is the designer, him or herself, or the participants of the users being tested, who are considerably like a stakeholder because they are like a customer of your product, or, you know, the eventual user. So I think those two people are like the main people who are involved in the beginning and towards the end of the phases. But each step itself also like varies. I think, yeah, it varies.
Yeah.
I'd say for me, the constants are the PM and the designers, and then everyone else kind of, depending on the phase that you're in. If you're closer to the discovery phase, it would be research and like your end users. And then if it's closer to the build stage, you'll start including more engineers and people to talk about feasibility. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut somebody off there.
No, absolutely. Well, this is a show. So in my experience, what I truly find value in is the PM and designers kind of tag teaming. But again, in design, we have UX designers, VX designers. I don't want to go in depth in each one of these, but ideally, if you have designers and the product owners who knows the most. So what we really do is kind of include PMs as much as possible throughout, even in storyboarding, even how might we, because they kind of bring in a lot of in-depth knowledge. In terms of research, we have, sometimes it gets siloed out, research comes back with findings, but the value is always when the team goes in and kind of everyone gets involved in this process. Like right now, everyone is more agile. So you have the entire team. Sometimes developers get involved as well. So I've seen a lot of value where I think about, from your experience, it's a lot of crazy eights. You get really good ideas from the developers, from the QA folks. You generate all these from everyone within, not just the designers.
Those are awesome points. I just got a Slack from Joel in San Diego, and he made a great point that documentation and just sharing out the results of these phases can be a really valuable thing to make sure that he feels involved and aware. Cool. Well, I think we
So,
got
Ryan, can I just add one point about storyboarding, which I just realized with some of the questions was, and as there might be some confusion about, like, to the previous question when somebody asked, when is storyboarding not useful? And the confusion a lot of people would have is, hey, I'm just given this task to, input a field or just a form or just add a submit button. Do I actually need to go through the storyboarding process? Is that right thing when the requirement is so simple? And again, it depends. Look, the value of storyboarding is, even with that button, you actually try to find what is the user problem, what is the user trying to do, and do the users actually need a button in there? Or, like, I know we get requirements from the product owners, from the subject matter experts saying that add a button. But as a designer, we should know, hey, give us the problem. Let me try to figure out if they actually need a button or not. Let me build a journey. Let me just see what the story is. And then you realize, hey, button is not what they wanted, because they wanted something different. So storyboarding always helps. It might be small, it might be big. So that's what I find value in storyboarding, is actually thinking, what is the user's problem? What are they trying to achieve? And not just designing input fields. That's not what we do. As UX designers, we try to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got style guides and HTML components to put fields into a form, right? That's not the purpose of what we're doing. That's a great point. Awesome. Well, I think this is the end of the questions. We've got most of them answered. We're still going to have some time, I think, if some of the presenters are going to hang around, but I'm going to kick it back over to James to wrap us up.
Thanks so much, Ryan, for moderating the Q&A, and of course to all of our incredible speakers from ServiceNow's Design Experience organization. Really appreciate you sharing all your insights and spending your time with our communities this evening. And of course, thank you to all of you wonderful attendees who came through, and we really, really appreciate your support, engagement, and questions. We'll be sending out all the slide decks and all the associated resources shortly, both as comments on the event pages and through email. We're going to take a quick 5-minute break, and if you have to go, please, by all means, have a great night. Thanks again. Otherwise, we'll do some breakout room networking, and it'll be a fun opportunity to connect with some folks.